Hello everyone. So we'll start with DPSP today, okay? So for the previous parts, if you have any doubts or any part to be discussed or anything like that, you can let me know for any of the previous parts that we have done, preamble, part 1, 2, 3, whatever it may be. So today we will start with DPSP part 4 of the Constitution of India. From which constitution the concept of DPSP is borrowed? Anyone remembers? From which country it is borrowed? So the concept of DPSP, it is borrowed from the Constitution of Ireland. So it is from Irish Constitution that we borrowed the concept of DPSP. Now DPSPs are contained under Articles 36 to 51. So what are DPSPs? But so the main difference between DPSP and fundamental rights that we have in part 3, basically they are providing us certain rights and like privileges, right? Both part 3 and also part 4, both of these are providing us some type of rights and privileges. Then why do we need like two separate provisions for this, two different parts where these rights are provided, right? So in part 3, what happens is that part 3 is mainly for part 3 that provides for fundamental rights. They are mainly providing us what type of rights? They are like civil and political rights. Civil and political rights. So what does civil right mean? It is the basic things that we need. For example, right to life, right to liberty, right against, like arbitrary arrest or some things like that. And political rights. So these are the rights that are given under part 3. And to provide these rights, we do not need any sort of, like resources. For example, the state shall not discriminate amongst people. For that, we do not need any resources, right? Much of resources. If state is providing us a right to life, personal liberty, for those things, what we do not need is that we do not need much of resources. So whatever rights are provided in part 3, for these rights, we do not need much of resources. So what happens is that these rights are included as guaranteed rights. So these rights are guaranteed to us under the Constitution. In case they are violated, what we can do is that we can approach the court and get them, like we can file a writ petition. So these rights are in a guaranteed form. Why? Because for this, we do not need much of resources from the part of state. They can anyways be fulfilled by the state. So these rights are guaranteed to us. But there are certain other rights as well which are necessary for, like having a better life. So those rights are included in part 4, considered as DPSP. What are these rights? These are like social economic rights. These are what type of rights? These are socio-economic rights. So for giving these socio-economic rights or privileges, we need enough resources from the part of state. So for these socio-economic rights or privileges, what we need is that we need resources. We need resources. If we are saying that the state should provide, provide free legal aid to people, that means we would need resources, right? To provide free legal aid, the state will have to like invest money on that particular part. So DPSPs are mainly some sort of socio-economic rights. And to give these rights or privileges, what we need is that we need resources from state. So these are not guaranteed to us, but how these are mentioned in the Constitution is that these are mentioned like some principles that the government should keep in mind while performing their activities. So these socio-economic rights or privileges, they are not guaranteed to us. but these are mentioned like some principles that the government or government authority should keep in their mind while making laws, enforcing any schemes or any other activities. They should keep these principles in mind, that this is what our ultimate aim should be when we are implementing some new legislation, introducing some new schemes for betterment of people. These are the things that they should keep in their mind, that this is what the constitution wants to ultimately achieve. So because of this problem, it was included in a separate part, and these are not guaranteed rights. We cannot guaranteed, like privileges. We cannot go to the court for enforcement of these principles. So DPSPs were inserted in a separate part so that whenever and wherever state feels that they can afford to provide these privileges, they can include them. So it is not like at one time they will have to include all of these principles, but they can gradually try to include this in their laws, legislations, policies, whatever it may be. So DPSPs are what? They are certain types of principles which are not binding on the government, but they are what? They are fundamental. Fundamental in governance. That means they are not like compulsory things, but they are fundamental in governance of the country. They are something that the government should, keep in their minds, and it is very important to include these principles whenever or wherever possible. So this is why we need two different provisions or two different parts where these privileges are mentioned or these privileges are given to us. So this is like the main difference that we have regarding part 3 and part 4, and why we need like two different things. Also, another thing that we have is the fundamental rights that we have. They are like some negative obligation. They are what? They are negative obligation on the state. Why fundamental rights? What it is telling is that the state shall not discriminate, the state shall not discriminate, or shall not do any. What happens is that all of these are what? They are mostly some sort of a negative obligation. What they are saying is that they are restricting the state from doing something. The state shall not deny to any person equality before law. So like that, what happens? No person shall be deprived. So these are what? These are like negative obligations, that for betterment of people, the state should not do certain things. What are these things? It is mentioned in part 3. But part 4 is what? Part 4 is like a positive obligation. Part 4 is like a positive obligation. That means the government should do certain things for betterment of the people. So these are certain things that the government should incorporate, the government should include. So this is the main difference between fundamental rights and DPSPs, why they are included in two different parts. Any doubts on this part? Is it clear, the difference?
Can you repeat it once again?
Okay. So we are
yes, the difference.
Yeah, so the difference basically is that for enforcement of fundamental rights, we need resources from the state. We do not need much resources. If we are saying that do not discriminate amongst people, for that we do not need resources. If we are saying everyone has the right to life and personal liberty, we do not need much of resources for that. But if we are saying provide free legal aid to the poor, we would need resources of the government, right? So we have two different things here. These are some sort of civil and political rights that the government could afford to provide at the time of independence. But these are some like some things that the government wanted to provide, but at that moment they were not able to afford all of these things. So these were included like some principles, that whenever and wherever possible, the government should try to incorporate these principles in their legislations and policies. Fundamental rights are what? They are some sort of negative obligation. Why? Because it is restricting the state from doing certain things. For example, the state shall not discriminate, no person shall be deprived, The state shall not deny to any person. So these are the negative obligations. What are things the state should not do for betterment of people? But in case of part 3, these are like positive obligations. What all things the state should do for betterment of people. So this is the main difference between part 3 and part 4. These were some sort of civil and political rights that the state could afford to provide at the moment of independence. But these are some privileges that the state wanted to provide, but at that moment they could not include all of these things. So these were included like some sort of principles that would be fundamental in governance. The government authorities, they should keep these principles in their mind while introducing any legislation, laws, any schemes or any other thing. So they should constantly try to include these principles in their policies and or other things. So fundamental rights are what? They are some sort of guaranteed rights for violation of which we can go to the court and file a writ petition. But in case of DPSP, because these are not like compulsory things, these are not guaranteed to us. We cannot go to the court for violation of DPSPs. But in certain cases, we can also go to the court. Can you tell in which cases we can go to the court for violation of any DPSP? So usually what happens for violation of DPSPs, we cannot go to the court. These are what? Just some fundamental principles that the government should follow. For example, the government has made a legislation on any specific article, any specific DPSP, the government has made a legislation. Then on that basis, we can go to the court. Under that legislation, we can file a case. That means DPSPs will not be enforceable in the court till the moment we do not have any laws or specific provisions regarding that. But the moment some specific provisions or legislations are made by the government, we can file a case under that particular specific legislation. So for many of these DPSPs, we already have legislations, and for some others, we still do not have. So we will see what all DPSPs we have. So this is like the main difference on why we need two different parts, two different provisions. So just like part 3, part 4 also starts with a definition. Definition of what? Definition of the term state. So it says in this part, unless the context otherwise requires, the term state will have same meaning like part 3. So which article of part 3 defines the term state? Which article?
12.
Yeah,
12.
Article 12. So what all things it includes? What all things this definition includes? Definition of the term state under Article 12. So it includes the government, the legislature, the parliament, any other local other bodies which are registered. It may include courts, universities, all those different entities would be included under definition of state under Article 12. So same definition would be applicable here. If here certain principles are mentioned as fundamental for governance, those principles even an university will have to take into consideration while publishing a certain type of notification order or something like that. So the same definition would be applicable even for part 4 of the Constitution. So to the same bodies, these principles are also applicable. Now Article 37, next article is Article 37. It talks about application of these principles that are mentioned under part 4 of the Constitution. It says the provisions of part 4 are what? These are not enforceable by the court, but these principles therein are what? They are fundamental for governance of the country, and it shall be duty of the state to apply these principles in making laws. So obviously, because at the time when constitution came into force, it was not possible for the government to provide all these privileges and follow all these principles at one moment. So what happens is that this article is mentioned that these principles will not be what? They will not be enforceable by any court. We cannot go to the court for violation of any of these principles, but these are fundamental in governance of the country. These are the things that we want to achieve in future. So what government should do is that they should apply these principles in making laws. So whenever they are making any laws, they are introducing some schemes or anything like that, they should keep this in mind that these are fundamental in governance of the country, and this will ultimately help us to achieve what the like what we wanted to achieve by passing this constitution. So these were made not non-enforceable by the court, but these are fundamental in governance of the country. But in case we are having any legislation on any of these DPSPs, under that legislation, we can go to the court. But we cannot go to the court saying that Article 38 of the Constitution is providing us for this particular DPSP. We cannot go to the court like that. But under any specific legislation, if at all we are having, we can go to the court and file a case under that particular legislation. So these are the two like provisions that that are not like talking about any specific principle, but this is like basically an introduction. It is saying on whom these principles would be applicable and what is the type of these principles. So next, from Article 38 only, these principles will start. What all things we have. Article 38 is state to secure a social order for promotion of welfare of people. So this particular article is mentioning two different principles that would help us achieve welfare of the common people. So what are these things? The state shall strive to promote the welfare of the people. How? By providing justice, social, economic, and political. So we also know that this particular concept of justice is included in preamble, right? That justice, social, economic, and political is to be provided to people. So this is the article from where this concept is derived in preamble. The preamble also talks about providing social, economic, and political justice, and this is the article that talks about this particular type of justice, that what the state should do is that the state shall strive to promote welfare of the people by securing and protecting effectively as it may a social order in which justice, social, economic, and political shall inform to all the institutions of national life. So these types of justices should be provided to the common people. Why this should be provided? In order to attain social order. For example, we are not providing for any type of justice, social justice or economic justice. Someone is, so in case of economic justice, my voice is not audible, is it?
No, ma'am, it's audible.
Okay. So what happens is that these types of justices should be provided by in order to secure a social order. For example, we are in a society where there is no economic justice. Someone is paid more, someone is paid very less for the same type of work. Then what happens is that we do not have any sort of political justice. Someone is allowed to vote, someone is not allowed to vote. There is no like uniform applicability of laws or anything like that. So in that case, what happens is that we cannot have a proper social order, right? People would not be happy with the situation that someone has been treated this way and someone else has been treated this way. So what happens is that there should be social justice, there should be justice of these types, social, economic, and political. Why? In order to promote social order. Next is to minimize inequalities in income. What happens is that inequalities of status, facilities, or opportunities should be reduced. So the state shall constantly try to minimize any sort of inequalities in income that may be there. So for same type of work, same payment should be given irrespective of gender of the person, irrespective of their type of employment or other things. So this is what is called as economic justice. And in terms of providing facilities and opportunities, also same type of options should be given to all the people. There should not be discriminations on the basis of this. Certain next article is certain principles of policy to be followed by the state. So if you have any doubts on any of these articles, you can let me know. I'm just going one by one. If you have any doubts on anyone, you can tell me. So next article that we have is certain principles of policy to be followed by the state. The previous one was what? It was specifically regarding welfare of people. For common welfare of people, what all things to be done? That we should provide justice, social, economic and political, and we should try to minimize any inequalities in terms of income, providing opportunities, facilities, etc. Next one is what? It is not specific to any area, but it is mentioning certain different things that the state should try to do. So it is certain principles of policy to be followed by the state. That means it is not specific to one area or one particular thing, but it is the general certain things that the state shall try to do. What are these? Firstly, it says that citizens, both men and women, equally have the right to adequate means of livelihood. So there should not be any discrimination made by the state in terms of providing adequate means of livelihood based on gender. So if government is introducing any particular scheme, there should not be any discrimination between men and women, that only one gender would be provided with this particular facility. It should be provided to what? It should be provided to both men and women if government is introducing any scheme for means of livelihood. For example, we have the MGNREGA scheme, right? What happens in this is that in order to enhance livelihood in rural areas, government is providing 100 days of guaranteed employment in one financial year to every household whose adult members, it may be men or women, they volunteer to do unskilled manual work. So government is providing 100 days of guaranteed work to those unemployed people in order to work in unskilled manual work. So it may be in some construction of roads or construction of any public place or things like that, that 100 days of guaranteed employment would be provided. So this provision or this scheme is why? For the betterment of livelihood, right? For betterment of the people. So this is what they are saying, that there should not be any discrimination made. Now, MGNREGA would be similarly applicable for both men and women. They are not discriminating on the basis of gender. So this is what this article, provision talks about. Next is that the ownership and control of material resources of the community are so distributed as best to subserve the common good. So whatever resources we are having as a country, as a state, maybe as a district or whatever it is, those should be held for what? It should be held for common good. For example, there is one public trust doctrine. There is one concept of public trust doctrine under environmental law, right? What is public trust doctrine is that whatever resources we are having as a maybe country, as a state or as a district, right? What happens is that resources will be under control of government. So what happens? Whatever resources we are having, those resources would be under control of government. What government will do is that government will maybe use those resources, or maybe, they can take decisions on those resources for betterment of common people. It should not be for their own personal benefit, but it should be for benefit of the general public. For example, one particular state is having for example, one district is having like big empty plot. What the government can do is that government can take a decision to like build some park or some playground, field, some like a stadium, something like that. So what happens is that that would be used for benefit of the common like for common good. Maybe the government would derive some revenue out of that. The common people in that particular state can make use of that. So this is what they are saying, that ownership and control of the material resources of community are to be what, for common good, of the common good. It should not be for benefit of the government that they are using or utilizing those resources, but it should be for common good. It will include maybe some some forests, some opening of some zoos, any other things, right? Opening any public places or making some improvements on it. All those things should be for common good, betterment of the common people. It should be for betterment of the entire state, the entire district, or the country as a whole, but not for the personal motives of the government. Next is that the operation of economic system does not result in concentration of wealth and means of production to the common detriment. So what happens here is that the operation of economic system, so government should ensure that the economic system is such that like wealth is not concentrated in one section of or one group of people only. It should not be that the rich is becoming richer and poor is becoming poorer. The economic system of the country should be such that we ensure that even the poor people are getting some benefits, even the rich people are contributing something to that. So a good example would be, for example, Income Tax Act. Income Tax Act, what happens is that certain benefits are given, right? That people earning what happens is that people earning below 5 lakhs per year, they would be exempted from paying income tax. Then after that also there are certain like criteria that people earning from this to this much amount, they would be paying this much percentage of income tax. So what happens is that if we are having one act called as Income Tax Act, it should not be that everyone is paying, for example, 5% of their income, 10% of their income. Why? Because then it would mean that it would be a very heavy load on the people who are earning less, and it would not be that much of load for people who are earning more. So what happens is that the economic system, the laws, the policies should be such that we are ensuring that there is what the concentration of wealth is not on one section or one group of people. There is equality in terms of that also. So one good example would be Income Tax Act, that it is not similarly applicable to all the people, but it it divides all the citizens in certain sections or certain categories, and based on that the liabilities are imposed, that people under this particular group would be paying this much percentage of their income as income tax. So like that, it is to ensure that the rich are not becoming richer and poor are not like suffering too much because of the economic policies or systems that we are having. Next is that there shall be equal pay for equal work, both for men and women. So this we already know, right? That if both men and women are doing same type of work, there should not be discrimination in terms of payment only because of gender. So for same type of work, same payment should be given. One good example would be equal, like we have legislations, right, for these kind of things also. For minimum wages act and all also, there is no discrimination on the basis of gender. Whatever amount is fixed as minimum wage, that would be applicable for the entire district, maybe for the entire state. There will not be any discrimination based on gender. Next is saying the health and strength of workers, men and women, and the tender age of children are not abused, and that citizens are not forced by economic necessity to enter vocations unsuited to their age and strength. what does this provision mean? For example, because of economic necessities, what happens is that the health and strength of workers, whether it is men, women, children, it should not be abused, and they should not be forced to work on situations or situations where it is not good for their health or for their body. So what happens is that economic necessity should not force any worker to do something which is not good for their maybe health or strength, or should not be made to do overwork. So good example would be the Maternity Benefit Act. For example, if we were not having a legislation called as Maternity Benefit Act that is providing for like 6 months of leave, and then also some child care leave of like 2 years for government employees. So if this particular legislation was not there, and if, for example, one woman becomes mother, so what happens is that she would be bound by economic necessities, right? Because if she is not joining work, she will have to lose her job. So what happens is that in that case, it would mean that this is what using the abuse on the strength of the worker, right? The worker would need leave, but she is not getting. Why? Because of economic necessity. So it is saying that government should introduce certain legislations that ensure that health and strength of workers, both men and women and children, are not abused, and they are not forced to do something which they are not physically capable of doing, or for which they do not have the strength to do that particular work. So it should not be abused in that terms. So another example would be, for example, in normal any like job, right? What happens is that there are certain provisions for giving leaves on public holidays, then for any festivals and anything restricted holidays are there, for sick leaves and all are there. If those provisions were not there, what happens is that if the like employer is saying that 7 days a week you need to work, the person will have to work. Why? Because of economic necessity. So we need certain legislations that are putting restrictions on these things, that these things should not be done, and this is how you should operate. So this ensures that there is no any kind of abuse on the health and strength of workers, that whatever does whatever is good for them, that only they are doing. It should not be misused by the employer. So this would be a good example. Then Factories Act also is providing for a lot of provisions on benefit of workers. So that also you can take as an example, that if the Factories Act was not there, maybe many people would not have been aware about their rights and rights and privileges also. So it even tells us that all the privileges that the factory is giving, you should display those facilities in a board which is like visible to all the employees, so that they get to know about it. When a new employee is joining, you should inform them about the privileges that you are providing. So all of those things should be included in this. Another would be Contract Labor Regulation and Abolition Act. So regarding contract labors also, what happens is that contract people would be hired on contract basis. They would not be paid equally as compared to the regular employees, but the same type of work only they are also doing. Maybe they would be made to work for extra hours. So that means it is an abuse on their strength or on their working ability. So these are the legislations that we have that in a way tries to control all of these things. So we also have one case regarding this particular thing. Any doubts on these principles? Anyone? Any confusion on these principles?
No.
Okay, so the first one that we saw was regarding welfare of the people. There were only 2 principles mentioned, and the next one, Article 39, is talking about certain general principles that the government should try to incorporate for betterment of people. So this not specific to any area or anything like that. It is providing adequate means of livelihood. There should not be any discrimination based on gender. Regarding ownership and control of resources, it should be held by the authorities for betterment of common good, not for their own personal motives. Operation of economic system, it should not result in the rich becoming richer and the poor becoming poorer. There should be equal pay for equal work, no matter whether it is a contract employee or a permanent employee, no matter whether it is a woman or a man, it should be equal for all. And also there should be certain provisions or principles or policies that ensures that health and strength of workers are not abused, and both men, women, children, anyone is not doing something which is not suitable for their age or strength. So these are the legislations that we have under this: that Contract Labor Regulation and Abolition Act, Maternity Benefit Act, Factories Act. There are many other legislations that we can like include under this provision. Whatever labor laws we have, all of that we can include under this, that they are in a way or the other, they are also ensuring that people are not doing something which is like beyond their strength or or like age, it is abused or something like that. Those provisions would also come under this principle. Okay, so these were the principles, 5, and also one more is there. Okay, so there was this case, State of Punjab versus Jagjit Singh. So in this particular case, the principle of equal pay for equal work that is contained in Part 4 of the Constitution was upheld by Supreme Court of India, even with respect to temporary employees and the permanent employees. So what happens is that it is the principle of equal pay for equal work, right? Wherever you see equal pay for equal work under the Constitution, it usually mentions regarding both men and women. That means the discrimination usually was between men and women. So whenever this provision is mentioned under Constitution, we see that equal pay for equal work, both for men and women, should be provided. But later on, we saw that it is not just men and women amongst whom discrimination is made, but this discrimination is made even amongst the temporary employees and the permanent employees also. So in this particular case, the Supreme Court upheld that when it is mentioning equal pay for equal work in Part 4 of the Constitution, it is not just regarding the gender, but it will also mean equal pay for equal work for the contractual employees and the permanent employees also. So in this case, what Supreme Court held, that temporary employees performing similar duties and functions. So performing similar duties and functions as discharged by permanent employees are entitled to draw wages, like similar amount of wages only should be provided. Just because a person is a contractual employee, he cannot be provided less like salary if he is doing same type of work or same type of functions as compared to a permanent employee. So the amount also should be same, because we are mentioning equal pay for equal work. So it does not just mean with regard to gender, but it also includes this particular like type of employment also, permanent and contractual employees. So this principle must be applied in situations where the same work is being performed irrespective of class of employees. So this case you can just refer if you want to for this particular thing. And also there are multiple legislations that are also ensuring that this particular things are like covered. Next principle that we have is that children are given opportunities and facilities to develop in a healthy manner and in conditions of freedom and dignity, and that childhood and youth are protected against any sort of exploitation and against moral and material abandonment. So this provision, what it is saying is that basically children should be provided with all the opportunities and facilities that are needed for full development of their personality. There should not be any sort of exploitation that the children need to face during their childhood. So regarding this also, we have legislation, that whatever legislations are there regarding child, right, protection of child, all of that would come under this. So Child Labor Prohibition and Regulation Act 1986, POSCO Act, that also would come. Then also we have fundamental duties under Article 51 AK, that parents should send their kids to school. We have fundamental rights. Children should be getting free and compulsory primary education. We have this legislation as well, Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act, under which children would be getting free education, then free midday meal, uniform, textbooks, all of those things they would be getting. Also, there are various schemes under which like some, like medical camps are held in government schools, so that they can ensure that the children are not facing with any sort of, like health issues or anything like that. Then medication would be provided to them. So all of those schemes and provisions would come under these like DPSPs only. That under this only, government is getting a direction that they should be implementing these types of schemes and policies in order to provide these things. So any doubts on this part, Article 38, 39?
Ma'am, I just have a doubt on Article 51 AK.
51 AK, okay, what is it?
Yeah, you told it is a fundamental duty of every parent to send their ward to the school. Till
Yeah.
what age is it compulsory for the people to send to the school?
That 6 to 14 years only, because it is like free thing, right? After that, parents may say that we cannot afford sending it to like for higher education or things like that. So that is like 6 to 14 years. But even after that, what happens is that there are certain, like free things are there, right? For certain groups of people, there are scholarships that are provided. For certain groups of people, maybe the tuition fees is waived off. So it would depend the parents of like from which group they are belonging. If it's a minority community, they are being provided with some sort of, like provisions that they do not need to pay fees and all. Then that would vary. But it is basically for children only. So you can consider that, like 6 to 14 years only, to whom free and compulsory primary education is being given. So this particular fundamental duty that is mentioned, it is for 6 to 14 years only, that the parents, not just parents, it is guardian, under whoever's custody the child is, they are having a duty to send their kids to school. So these two articles are related, Article 21A and 51AK. So both are like 6 to 14 years only. Even Article 21A is providing for free and compulsory education to children between the age of 6 to 14 years only. Okay, any confusion on this? Article 38, 39?
No.
So if any question comes on like these rights, you can also mention that in order to give power to this particular principle, we are having these legislations. In this particular case, the court also held like this. So you can also like give references to these legislations and all in case a question comes on any of these specific things. For example, like write a short note on or equal pay for equal work, that is mentioned under Constitution of India. So you can mention that it is not like a fundamental right that it was inserted, but it was rather a DPSP, like a fundamental principle that the government should follow while incorporating their laws, schemes, etc. So you can refer that these legislations the government has introduced. And also in this particular case, it was said that not just like on the basis of gender, but even on the basis of type of employment also, there shall not be discrimination on the amount that is paid to the person. So like that, you can give references to the legislations or other provisions of any statute that may be there. So then you can frame your answer. And if any particular article, like if they are saying that write a short note on like free legal aid that is mentioned under Constitution of India. So you can also mention along with the article that it is Article 39A that is providing for free legal aid. You can also mention that this provision was not originally there in the Constitution. It was inserted in 1976 by this particular amendment. Also, we are having these bodies, these legislation. So all of that you can also like refer, like 1 or 2 lines you can also refer about the legislations and other things apart from the provisions under Constitution. So next DPSP that we have is Article 39A, Equal Justice and Free Legal Aid. So when we know that Article 39A means it was not originally there, it was the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 that inserted this like DPSP. So whenever I'm getting any amendments, I'm highlighting it with this particular color so that if you are reading this document, it's easy for you to understand where cases are and where amendments are. So you can just go through these because you also need to know the important constitution amendments and also the cases. So if you are reading the cases, you can just check the document. Wherever this color is there, it's a case. Wherever this particular color is there, it's a constitutional amendment that I have mentioned. So it would be easier for you to read like this. So it was the 42nd Amendment Act of 1976 that inserted this particular DPSP, that equal justice and free legal aid. It says the state shall secure at the operation of legal system on the basis of equal opportunity and shall in particular provide free legal aid by suitable legislation schemes in other ways to ensure opportunities for securing justice are not denied to any citizen by reason of economic or other disabilities. So this particular provision or this particular DPSP, why it was inserted? Only in order to ensure that any citizen by reason of their economic and other disabilities. So any person because of their economic or other disabilities are not, facing any trouble in getting justice. So free legal aid should be provided. How? By making some legislations or schemes. So it may be by way of any legislation or scheme that government should try to provide for free legal aid in order to ensure that justice is open to all. Any person, whether because of economic reasons or because of any other any other sort of disabilities, they are not able to access justice. So it should not be the case. There should be provisions like this. So if you look at section 304 of CRPC, it also talks about a provision that if an accused person cannot afford a lawyer for his defense, then the court would assign a lawyer for that particular accused and the expenses would be borne by the state. So this is also a provision of CRPC that you can mention. And also we are having National Legal Services Authority. So this is like a body that has been established under the Legal Services Authorities Act 1987. So this body, what they are doing is that they are providing for free legal services to the weaker sections of the society, and also it is giving provisions for lok adalats for amicable settlement of disputes. And also for states also we are having state legal services authorities, and they would perform the same sort of things at a state level. So you can mention these things also if a question comes on free legal aid, that write a short note on free legal aid. So how you can frame your answer is that it was not originally there in the Constitution. In 1976 they inserted it by way of 42nd Constitutional Amendment Act. It is saying that because of any economic or other reasons or disabilities, no person shall be deprived of justice. So this, what happens is that states shall try to provide for free legal aid, whether it is by any sort of legislation or by introducing some sort of schemes. And we are also having provision under CRPC. We are also having legislations, legal services authorities act. So you can mention all of that in order to frame your question. Now there is one case that you can mention here. This case we also discussed while doing like fundamental rights also, right? Under Article 21, I think we already discussed this case. So similarly, like one case may be applicable for many sections of like articles also. So you can also refer this particular case for this article. So what this case is, Husainara Khatun versus Home Secretary, State of Bihar. This case was basically for right to speedy trial and free legal aid. So in part 3, we discussed that in this particular case, right to speedy trial was considered as what? It was considered as a part of Article 21 only. That if we are been given this right to life and personal liberty, we also have the right for speedy trial, because if a person is not tried for a very long time, maybe for what crime he was, like whatever crime was there for which he was accused, maybe the punishment was like hardly 1 year, but he's waiting for trial for like 2-3 years. So that means what? That means there is no justice that the person is getting. So it was considered that right to speedy trial is a part of fundamental right under Article 21. So it also spoke about free legal aid under this case. So what happened in this case is that basically this was a case that was filed regarding the prisoners who were detained in Bihar jail. So there were many people who were detained in Bihar jail, and they were waiting for their trial. Now what happens is that if they are not been tried for a very long time, their rights were been like violated. So what a lawyer did is that she prepared a report mentioning names of those like detained persons. And what she said is that these are the people who are been like waiting for their trial for a very long time. They have already waited for these many years. They have already completed their like basic the maximum punishment also, and all of that. So this, in this particular case, what the court discussing Article 21, the Supreme Court acknowledged that no person shall be deprived of life and personal liberty except accordance with procedure of law. So they should be provided with a fair and reasonable trial, and it should be done within that reasonable time only. The Supreme Court also held that Article 39A is a fundamental constitutional directive that emphasizes for free legal aid, and it should be what? Reasonable, fair and just. A person facing economic or other disabilities would not be able to secure justice. So this right is to be considered as a part of Article 21 only. So even though Article 39A is inserted in DPSPs only, we cannot enforce it. We should not consider it as a separate thing. We should consider it as a part of Article 21 only, because we are being given with the right to life and personal liberty, and this right may be taken away only by a procedure established by law. So that procedure should be reasonable, fair and just. It should not be something that is violating our rights. So even if it is a DPSP, it should be considered that it is a part of Article 21 itself, and people are having this right to speedy trial and also right to be defended. So this is also a part of Article 21 itself only. So you can refer this case also, that right to free legal aid was recognized and was considered that it's something basic thing that should be provided to people. So in this case, a lot of prisoners were also released from jail by an order of Supreme Court, because Supreme Court said that they have already completed the maximum term of punishment for that particular offense for which they are been like accused, and then they are waiting for their trial. So this is the case of Husainara Khatun that you can mention for Article 39. Any doubts on this part?
No.
Others, is it clear, the cases and all of that? If you have any doubts on any provision, you can see. Anyone, any problem with any article?
No, ma'am.
Now, next article that we have is Article 40. It talks about organization of village panchayats. So it says the state shall take steps to organize village panchayats and endow them with such powers and authority as may be necessary to enable them to function as units of self-government. Now, why this particular principle was given separately, like as a BPSP? Because it was possible, right? We are already having central government, state government, powers are divided, functions are divided, positions are mentioned, all of that are already done. So for village panchayats also, we could have mentioned a separate part and then given them powers and all of that, right? We could have already given the powers when constitution came into force. Why was it inserted as a directive principle? And it was said that the state shall take steps to organize that. Someday the state will take steps, would provide powers. Why this was inserted as a DPSP? It was because when India got independence, first of all, India was not having any experience, right? That dividing powers between central and state, how it will operate, how things will work and all of that. So if village panchayats were also there, that means what, there would be too many divisions, then a lot of problems might also occur. So it was said that for the time, whatever things are mentioned in the constitution, government would run accordingly. But subsequently, what the state shall do is that the state shall try to organize village panchayats and also should give them enough powers and authority that would entitle them to work as units of self-government. That means it should be done at a later point when the state thinks it necessary, that the state would give powers, enough of powers and authority to those bodies, and they will work as units of self-government. That for that particular village, they can take a decision, they would maintain records regarding birth, death, regarding property, who is holding what property. So all that, local level things, even that village panchayats can do. So that much power and authority should be given to them. So this is why it was inserted as a DPSP. So sometimes they ask what is the article that talks about organization of village panchayat. So you can remember the article, it is Article 40 of the Constitution. Next DPSP that we have is right to work, to education and to public assistance in certain cases. So we are already having certain other DPSPs regarding work, education and all of that, right? But this is what, this is specifically regarding right to work, education and public assistance in certain cases. So what all cases are this? In cases of unemployment, old age, sickness, disablement and in any other case of undeserved want. So what happens is that in general, though we are talking about right to work, education and all of that, but in certain cases where there is unemployment, maybe because of old age, any sort of sickness, disablement or other conditions, it may be necessary for the state to make certain other provisions for work, education and other sort of public assistance. So that also should be done by the state. So what the state shall do is that the state shall, within the limits of its economic capabilities. So it cannot be like the state has to do means the state has to do only. It should be within their economic capabilities only. They should try to do what? Is that they should try to secure right to work, education and public assistance in cases of these things. So we can also refer to the MGNREGA scheme here, that it is providing for what, 100 days of guaranteed work. So it is not providing 365 days of guaranteed work. Why? Because to provide 365 days of guaranteed work, we would need more resources. So state is not having that much resources at the moment. So what they can afford is 100 days only. So economically, they can afford 100 days of guaranteed work only. So that much is what they are providing. So this is why economic capability is included. So that is how it should be provided. Also, it may be for old age. So maybe some old age pension is given. For some sort of sickness, free medication would be provided, free treatment would be provided in a hospital. For certain diseases, maybe for free they would do the test and all of that. For disablement also, there are certain schemes that specially able people are getting some sort of scholarships, then reservations also. So whatever they can do for these cases where assistance, right, public assistance may be needed, wherever the government can do within their like economic capabilities, they should try to incorporate these type of schemes, principles, etc. So this is what this principle is all about, that it may be with regard to work also, education also, or any other normal things also. Public assistance, for example, providing old age pension to people, right? So that would also be included under this thing also. It may be with regard to sickness, for example, for HIV/AIDS, the medicine that comes is very expensive. So for certain states, the government is providing for that medicine for free. Government is providing for some amount as, you know, like expenses, medical expenses. So certain schemes may be there like this, and it may even differ from state to state also. It may not be a central state, but the central scheme, but the state governments may also provide these kinds of facilities also. So this is a scheme that you can refer in this particular article. Also, this is talking about right to education also, right? So you can refer the case of Mohini Jain versus State of Karnataka. So this case also we already discussed under Article 21, Part 3 of the Constitution, that under Article 21, right to education is also included. So Article 21, if it is providing us for right to life and personal liberty, it does not just mean having an animal existence with basic needs like food, shelter, and clothing. It also includes certain other things that we need for better development of ourselves, and it would also include education. So in this particular case, what happened is that Mohini Jain, she was a medical aspirant from Uttar Pradesh. She filed a writ petition in the Supreme Court challenging a notification which was published by Government of Karnataka, and it allowed the private medical colleges of Karnataka to charge capitation fees. So capitation fees means basically a very high amount of fees that they were charging for the seats which were not under the government seats. So privately, if someone is taking admission, a huge amount of fees they were charging under that particular notification. So she filed a writ petition in the Supreme Court challenging that particular notification, like validity of that notification. So in absence of express fundamental right, the court interpreted that because this particular right is what it is under DPSP only that this right is given. So it was included under Article 21, and court said that private institutions are also having a duty to ensure equal access to and non-discrimination with regard to delivery of higher education. So higher education should not be treated as a business, and they should not use their own monopoly, but it should be accessible to the common people. And for like education like medical and all, it should be on merit basis only, so that everyone is getting enough opportunity to get admitted. So this case also you can refer, that is talking about right to education. That even if certain articles, right, they are contained in DPSPs, what court has done is that court has tried to widely interpret any of the articles of Part 3, and they have tried to include that this particular provision or this particular thing is also a part of this article of Part 3 only. So similarly for Article 21, you would see many cases are there where they have tried to include a lot many things under the provision. Even though it's like only one line, they have tried to include a lot of things under Article 21. So similar would be the case with this one, that you can refer that this is a case regarding right to education. And also regarding the schemes and all, you would get many schemes if you look for. Pradhan Mantri, some schemes you would get like for old age pension, you would get regarding unemployment, sickness, disablement, you would get many schemes also. For state-wise also, you would get many schemes. So if you are appearing for Karnataka judiciary, maybe you can go through a few of the schemes that are applicable in Karnataka maybe, so you can refer that also. That under this particular article, these are the things that they are providing. So this is like an example that I have given, MG Nrega. This is also very much related to this particular article, right to work. That within their economic capability they are providing, not for 365 days that they are providing. Whatever they can afford at the moment, that only they are providing. Next is Article 42, provision for just and human conditions of work and maternity relief. The state shall make provision for securing just and human conditions of work and for maternity relief. So again, here also those maternity benefit act would be applicable. Under Factories Act also there are provisions that mothers can take like 2-3 breaks to, you know, like go and see their kids and things like that. Many other provisions are there under labor laws also that ensure that even after becoming a mother, the woman is able to work in a a proper environment. There are childcare rooms and all of that. Childcare leave is given. So all of those things would come under Article 42 only, that it is trying to provide for a condition of work where women are able to work properly and some sort of benefits or facilities are given to them. Next article is Article 43. It is talking about living wage, etc. for workers. So again, it is saying that by way of suitable legislations or economic organization or any other way to all workers, agricultural, industrial or otherwise, a living wage, conditions of work, ensuring decent standard of life, full enjoyment of leisure and social and cultural opportunities, and in particular the state shall endeavor to promote cottage industry on an individual and cooperative basis in rural areas. So for cottage industries also the government is passing some schemes and all that you can refer. And also for living wage, what happens is that we are having multiple legislations under labor laws, like fixation of minimum wage act and all the other labor laws that we have, bonus act, all of those things we have that ensure that people are getting enough money for like a decent standard of life. So while fixing minimum wage, what they ensure is that it is not just survival. They also see that like a family of 4 members are at least able to afford their medical expenses, education and all of those things. So those things are taken into consideration, and then only minimum wage is calculated for any particular state. So only it differs from state to state, that like cost of living would be higher in certain areas, cost of living may be less in certain areas. So based on that, minimum wage would be fixed so that it is enough for maintaining a decent standard of life and full enjoyment of leisure time, and social and cultural opportunities are also given to those workers or employees. Next is Article 43A and 43B. So these two articles are again inserted by 42nd Amendment Act 1976. I have highlighted the amendment part. So it is saying participation of workers in management of industries. Again, the state shall try to make some legislations or by other ways, they should try to ensure that participation of workers in management of undertakings, establishments or other organizations are organizations engaged in any industry. So participation of workers is also very much important. We also have Trade Unions Act is also an example of this. Why Trade Unions Act is needed? So that there is a union where workers can, to whom workers can tell their, wishes, aspirations and things like that. and that trade union will ultimately go to the management and represent the wishes of the workers. So by way of certain legislations, the state shall ensure that workers are entitled to take part in decisions taken by management regarding any sort of industry, factory, etc. Why this is important? If a decision is taken only by the management in any industry, in any factory. So in any industry or any factory, if decision is taken only by the management, it may be biased towards management. It may not be for benefit of workers. But if workers are also contributing or participating in that decision making, it would be a non-biased decision that would be made. So this is important, that workers should also take part in those decision making process. Next is promotion of cooperative societies. So the state shall endeavor to promote voluntary formation, autonomous functioning, democratic control, and professional management of cooperative societies. We have the Cooperative Societies Acts, right? Under that, various cooperative societies are formed. They are working on areas like any particular area, right? For example, milk products, providing some essential services, essential commodities. So things like that, we are having what? Cooperative societies. So it is saying that state shall ensure that there are voluntary formation and autonomous functioning. They are independent bodies. They are properly functioning and working on any particular specific area. For example, that Nandini, I think, is a cooperative society that is dealing with milk products and other sweets and all of those things. So like that, what happens is that there should be voluntary formation of cooperative societies, and those would be regulated under the Cooperative Societies Act, and they can act like an independent autonomous body having their own powers and functions. So these two were also inserted by the 42nd Amendment Act. Next is Article 44, Uniform Civil Code for Citizens. So Uniform Civil Code basically is that for criminal laws, we are having one uniform code that is applicable for all, irrespective of their religion, language, gender, etc. But for civil laws, we are not having one uniform law, but it differs based on religion of the disputing parties. So gradually, the state shall try to promote uniform civil code. Obviously, it was not possible that at one moment the state would come and then they would make one law that would be applicable to all, because everyone is attached to their own religious practices and all of that. Their own, whatever they are following, they are attached to that. So to whose practices or whose laws to be taken. So it was decided that later on, gradually the state shall try to secure a uniform civil code that would be applicable throughout India. So the only state where uniform civil code is applicable is Goa. For rest of the states, we are still okay. So any doubts on these articles? Anyone? Any confusion on these DPSPs?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Next is provision for early childhood care and education to children below the age of 6 years. So the state shall endeavor to provide early childhood care and education for all the children until they complete the age of 6 years. So for this also, it would need resources of the state. So it was inserted as a DPSP only. We are now having certain schemes that are ensuring this particular thing. So in government schools, what happens is that it is age 6 to 14 years education is provided. But there are also some primary playgroup kind of things that the government has opened, where children are getting education for free, where they can go, they can play, learn some poems, basic alphabets and things like that. So those facilities are also there. For government hospitals, when a child is born, for like nutrition and other needs of the child, a certain amount is given, maybe certain items would be given to the child. So those schemes would be under this Article 45 only, that the state shall try to ensure early childhood care and education for children under the age of 6 years. So certain benefits are given to those children also. Like for example, there are consultation that is provided regarding what all things to be given, what all things to be fed to the child, what all vaccination and all are needed for the child. So all of those schemes would also come under Article 45 only, that is providing for this, right? Okay, so the Article 45 is relating to provisions regarding early childhood care and education, where we are already having a lot of schemes under which government is trying to provide for all of, provide for all of those facilities and meet the nutrition or other needs of the child. Next article is Article 46. It is on promotion of educational and economic interest of scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and other weaker sections. So the state shall promote with special care educational and economic interest of the weaker sections of the people, and in particular SC, ST, and shall protect them from social justice and all forms of exploitation. So now for SC and ST and other backward classes, we are already having reservation policies, right? That for education purposes, they would need a lesser, minimum eligibility would be less for them. That in terms of economic interest, they are also need to pay less educational fees and all of that. So those benefits are already there in terms of reservation, providing reservation. So this is what, apart from educational and economic interest, it is also talking about social injustices. Social injustices and protection of them from any sort of social injustice. So we have the SC, ST Prevention of Atrocities Act that would provide for a greater punishment for the same type of crime committed against the normal person and SC, ST person. Then what happens is that we are having some special cells also. For example, in Delhi police, if you see Delhi police website, you would see there is some SC, ST cell is there, something is there. Okay, if you see the Delhi police website, some like special cell or something is there that would deal with matters regarding any sort of, injustices or any sort of crimes committed against them. So what happens is that we are even having separate bodies to deal with any sort of problems that they are facing, apart from the other privileges that are being given to them. So this was also inserted as a DPSP, on which we already have a lot of provisions. We already have legislations and things like that. So that means that on this particular thing also, government has taken action on this principle also. We are also having certain schemes that are providing for, benefits to them. For example, for higher education, they are being provided with some sort of scholarship. So all of those things would come under Article 47. That under Article 47 or from Article 46, the state is getting that power to make certain special legislations for betterment of them. So this is regarding promotion of economic and educational interest of SC, ST and any other weaker section. Next is duty of the state to raise the level of nutrition and standard of living and to improve public health. So in order to raise the level of nutrition and standard of living of its people and to improve public health in general, it is the primary duty of the state. And for that, what the state can do is that it can bring about prohibition of consumption except for medical purposes, intoxicating drinks and of drugs which are injurious to health. So it is the primary duty of the state that they should ensure public health, right? Improvement of public health. And for that, apart from taking the necessary steps, they can also put some restrictions or ban on consumption of any sort of intoxicating drinks or drugs other than for medical purposes. So they may impose restrictions on liquor sale, sale of any sort of drugs or other things. And we would need special, like prescriptions and all we would need to show to buy those drugs. So this particular provision is also coming under DPSPs only, that a duty is imposed on states and said that it is the primary duty of the state to ensure improvement of public health and to raise the level of nutrition standard of living of people. So there are some food safety regulations are there, rules are there. Those would also come under Article 47 only, from which the state is getting power. Again, we are having some Karnataka Excise Act 1965, Bombay Prohibition Gujarat Amendment Act 2009, ban on liquor sale during COVID. So all of those would also come under Article 47 only, that we are having laws that are restricting the sale or consumption of liquor on certain states or certain territories. Those would also come under this part only. And also ban on liquor sale during COVID-19, that also would come under this provision only. That is the primary responsibility of the state to ensure public health. So it was considered that consumption of liquor may, like reduce the immunity for that moment. So it was like banned for a particular like time frame. So those things would come under Article 47, where government can even put a restriction on sale or consumption of liquor, and it can also take steps for improving the level of nutrition and standard of living of people. So maybe they can conduct some free camps and other things for the people in general, for schools and all. They can visit and then provide medicines if at all needed. So those things are also a duty of the state, and they are bound under Article 47. The next article that we have is Article 48. So what is Article 48? It says Organization of Agriculture and Animal Husbandry. So what is it? That the state shall try to organize agriculture and animal husbandry on modern and scientific lines, and shall in particular take steps for preserving and improving the breeds. So what the state shall do is that whatever developments are there in terms of modern scientific equipments or research or other things, those should be used in order to like for betterment of the agriculture and animal husbandry, and it should be used. And also there may be certain type of prohibitions that may be put on slaughtering of cows and other kettles and other things. So there are legislations also that are being passed, like Wildlife Protection Act, Mysore Prevention of Cow Slaughter Act, Bombay Animal Preservation Act. So regarding cow slaughter, we are having numbers of legislations that are made by the various states, right? So these are also done under Article 48 only, that it is a duty of the state. Some animals are having agricultural benefit also, right? For example, cows and all. So it was considered that putting a restriction on slaughtering of cows is coming under Article 48 only. State is doing that only in order to ensure that there are like enough cows left in order to perform all the agricultural things that we need to do. So like that, there may be ban imposed by the government by passing certain legislations also. Hunting is prohibited under like legislation, so all of that would come under this. Also, we discussed the case of Muhammad Hanif Qureshi. So that same case would even come under DPSP. So what happened in this particular case is that the petitioner, who was member of this Muslim community, and they were engaged in slaughtering of cows. So what they said is that that particular legislations that the state governments are making in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, they are infringing their right to free trade and business, because they are into that particular business. And also it is not like a violation of right to equality and their religious freedom and all of that. But what the government court held is that government is having a duty under Article 48 that they should think about protection of or improvement of agriculture and protection of animal husbandry, because cows or all those other animals are having some use in agricultural activities, and because majority of our people in India are dependent on agriculture, so imposing a ban on slaughtering of cows is not violating your right to free practice on business or anything like that, or it is not even going against your right to religion that is given under part 3. So this case you can refer under Article 48, where it was said that government is having that particular duty that it can take certain actions in order to preserve for improvement of these agriculture and animal husbandry. So this is the case that you can refer both for part 3 and part 4. Next is Article 48A, that is talking about protection and improvement of environment and safeguarding of forest and wildlife. Again, this particular article was also originally not there in the Constitution. It was again inserted by 42nd Amendment Act, and it is saying that the state shall endeavor to protect and improve environment and to safeguard the forest wildlife of the country. Again, same that public trust doctrine we can apply here, that it is the duty of the state that they should take necessary steps in order to improve the environment and to safeguard the forest wildlife of our country that we are having. So the duty is imposed on state under Article 48A, and also we are having one fundamental duty under Article 51A clause G, that says that to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests, lakes, rivers, wildlife, etc., to have compassion. So a duty is also imposed on the people, that on the citizens, that we also should ensure that we are taking enough steps for preservation of environment and wildlife. So this is what Article 48A is all about. It is related to Article 51AG, the fundamental duty that we have, and it was originally not there, this DPSP. It was later on inserted, giving a directive to the government. Is it clear until here? Any question, any doubts, anyone? Any doubts on the articles?
No. No, ma'am.
Okay, next article that we have is Article 49, that is talking about protection of monuments and places and objects of national importance. So it says the state shall be under an obligation to protect every monument or places or objects of artistic or historical interest that may be declared by law by the parliament. So it is not like whatever is considered as a place of national importance in 1950. It may be later on also declared by the parliament by passing certain rules, regulations, or laws. So whatever is declared as any place, object, or monuments, etc. of national importance, regarding preservation of those also, state is having a responsibility that it should preserve them from any spoliation, disfigurement, destruction, removal, disposal, or export, etc. So for this, we are having acts like Ancient Monuments Preservation Act of 1904, Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act of 1958, etc. So while distributing funds also, there may be a certain amount of fund that may be in given for betterment of any particular place, right? For renovation or other things like that in a place of national importance. So the state can take those actions. On a budget, they can say that this particular amount of fund, we would be giving it to the states for like renovation or other things in such places of importance that we can refer. So this is under Article 48, that the state is given this duty that they should take measures or steps to preserve these places, objects, monuments, etc. So there was this case MC Mehta versus Union of India, the very famous case of discoloration of Taj Mahal, right? It is also known as Taj trapezium case. So what happened in this case? MC Mehta versus Union of India 1986. And this case was basically relating to discoloration of Taj Mahal because of all the iron, glass, chemical industries that were there in the nearby areas. Also the Mathura refinery. So a case was filed saying that the color of Taj Mahal is becoming, like slightly yellow. So it was all because of the high toxic emissions released from these particular industries. And because of that, along with Taj Mahal, there are like 255 other historical monuments within this Taj trapezium, where that was decided in that particular case only. And it was said that there are like around 255 other historical monuments also within that particular area, and they are suffering from disfigurement, discoloration, and all of that thing because of the emissions and all. So there were a lot of reviews, committees were set up, reports were submitted, all of that was done. And finally what happens was that industries were asked to shift to eco-friendly fuel and use less of diesels generators, and asked the state government also to improve on power supply to the city so that use of generators is can be reduced. So in this particular case, what happened is that there were certain restrictions put, certain guidelines were issued that the factories and other industries had to follow in order to cut down on their emissions and the impact on the environment that they were having. And also it was said that pollution control boards were asked to monitor regarding any further activities of deterioration or any other things that they may notice. If anything happens, they should inform the court so that they can pass on some other, guidelines or measures can be taken in order to reduce that. So this is one important case relating to Article 49, that is giving a, obligation on the state that it is state's duty to do whatever they want to do in order to protect and preserve those monuments, places, and objects of national importance. So what in this case was done is that government issued, court issued certain guidelines that should be followed, and also a duty was imposed on the pollution control boards, both of the state and central, that they should also closely monitor the activities of these industries and also see if any adverse impact is there on these monuments and things like that. If it is there, they should inform the government regarding the same, and then government would take actions later on. Next is Article 50, separation of judiciary from executive. So it is basically talking about independence of judiciary. So because judiciary is one main organ that is providing justice, ensuring enforcement of acts and other things, there should always be separation of judiciary from the executive. It should not be before giving a judgment, the judge has to think about his his job security, maybe his salary and other things. It should not be dependent on the executive, so that judges are free to deliver their judgments freely without having any other things to be considered. So it is Article 50 that is talking about separation of judiciary from the executive. So we even see a latest example, if you want to find, it is regarding the RTI Act 2005, which was amended in 2019. So the latest amendment to RTI Act 2019 that was made after that Narendra Modi case. So one person filed an RTI application where in Delhi University. Delhi University, he wanted to know whether Narendra Modi was a student from Delhi University, private student, and Delhi University was not providing a proper reply. They were just saying that, yeah, he studied there, but we cannot give you any documents or any other proofs like this. So the case ultimately went to the High Court, and then the matter was decided. So what happened is that during that particular case only an amendment was made to the RTI Act. What changes they did is that the State Information Commission or the Central Information Commission that we are having, like their salaries, their term of office, that would be decided by the government from time to time. That means what, they were independent bodies previously. They have delivered such wonderful judgments, but their power was restricted by that particular amendment. That before giving a judgment against the government or before passing an order against the government, they would have to think about their, like their job, their salary, and other things like that. So this is why it was inserted in DPSP, that it is important that judiciary is kept separate from the executive so that they are able to perform their task properly without thinking about any other things. Then the last DPSP that we have is regarding promotion of international peace and security. It is again saying the state shall endeavor to promote international peace and security, maintain just and honorable relations between nations, foster respect for international laws, treaty obligations, etc., encourage settlement of international disputes arbitrarily. So it is basically a like direction that is given to the government how they should deal with other foreign countries. They should have respect on the international laws, treaty obligations that they may have ratified. They should try to settle any sort of international disputes amicably by way of arbitration. They should ensure international peace and security. So all of those guidelines are also being given to the states. So this is all about the DPSP. We are having some like MCQs. We can do that in the next class. So any doubts on the articles part you can ask. Any confusion on any article?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am.
Okay, so fine then. In next class, what we can do is that we can look at some of the MCQs. So meanwhile, what you can do is that you can just go through, right? That article, like part 4, it is talking about DPSPs. What all the articles 36 to 51. You can just go through the articles, what each of these articles say, so that it's easier for you to like solve the MCQs that we will be doing in next class. So like today and tomorrow you can just go through what all things these articles contain, and then it would be easier for you when we look at the MCQs, that what type of questions may be asked. Okay, so fine then. Next class we will continue with the fundamental duties that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.